In the late 2nd century BC, Rome stood as the dominant power of the Mediterranean. Its armies had conquered Greece and Macedonia, annihilated Carthage, and inflicted a crippling blow on the Seleucid Empire. On the surface, Rome seemed unstoppable, its wealth and influence growing by the day. Yet beneath this veneer of triumph, the Republic faced serious internal and external challenges. Social inequality was rising, and the traditional militia-based army of Rome was proving inadequate to meet the new threats emerging on its borders. Among these threats were the migrating Germanic tribes, whose arrival would force Rome to rethink its military entirely. Rome's challenges. By the early 2nd century BC, the Roman Republic, despite its impressive conquests and growing influence across the Mediterranean, faced mounting internal and external pressures that threatened to undermine its stability. The backbone of Rome's military power had traditionally been its citizen militias, ordinary Roman citizens who were required to provide their own arms, armor, and equipment to serve in the legions. This system had functioned effectively during earlier periods of expansion, when the population of eligible landowning citizens was sufficient to fill the ranks. However, by this time, the structure of Roman society had begun to change. Large estates, or latifundia, operated by slave labor, had begun to dominate much of the Italian countryside, reducing the number of small landowners who could serve in the army. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a small elite created a growing social divide, leaving a large portion of the population landless and disenfranchised. These men, while numerous, were ineligible to serve in the traditional legions due to the property requirement, leaving the Republic with a shrinking pool of potential soldiers. This combination of military limitations and social inequality posed a significant risk to Rome's security. A limited citizen army was ill-prepared to respond to the scale and intensity of threats that were emerging along the Republic's increasingly extensive borders. In 113 BC, this latent vulnerability became painfully apparent when a Germanic force crossed the Danube River and entered Roman territory. These tribes, known later as the Cimbri and Teutones, were driven from their homelands by extreme climate conditions that made life in their regions nearly impossible. Their migrations brought them into conflict with Rome, and over the next several years, they swept through the northern provinces with devastating effect. The Cimbri and Teutones were not merely raiders. They were large, organized armies capable of engaging Roman legions in pitched battles. The mobility and ferocity of these Germanic forces exposed the weaknesses inherent in the citizen militia system, which relied on limited numbers of trained soldiers who often lacked consistent combat experience. The severity of the threat escalated steadily, and by 105 BC, Rome was confronted with a military catastrophe of unprecedented scale. In one engagement, an army of approximately 80,000 Roman legionaries was annihilated by the Germanic forces, leaving the Republic in a state of panic. The magnitude of this defeat shook the confidence of both the Roman Senate and the citizenry. People feared that the Germanic hordes might march unopposed on the city itself, bringing the Republic to the brink of collapse. It became painfully clear that Rome could no longer rely on the old system of citizen militias, nor could it continue to field armies drawn solely from the small pool of property-owning citizens. The crisis demanded a radical rethinking of military organization, recruitment, and strategy, an overhaul that would fundamentally transform the Roman army and ultimately the Republic itself. Marius's rise. Amid the turmoil facing the Roman Republic in the early 1st century BC, Gaius Marius emerged as the man capable of addressing the military crisis. Born into a family of equestrian rank, but outside the senatorial elite, Marius was determined to make his mark through service and ambition. From early on, he displayed strategic skill and personal courage, qualities that would define his military career. Marius gained recognition through campaigns in Africa and Numidia, earning a reputation for decisiveness, innovation, and the ability to inspire loyalty among troops. He saw that Rome's growing military challenges required not just bravery in battle, but also structural reform. Studying the successes and failures of earlier commanders, he recognized the need to professionalize the army and expand recruitment beyond the traditional property-owning class. In 105 BC, with Rome threatened by migrating Germanic tribes, Marius was elected consul in absentia. His election reflected both the seriousness of the crisis and the people's confidence in his talent despite his non-aristocratic background. Upon returning to Rome, he took command of the legions, facing the immediate task of confronting the Cimbri and Teutones, who had already exposed the weaknesses of Rome's citizen-militia system. Marius quickly implemented sweeping military reforms. While some tactics had been tested by previous generals, he institutionalized them, permanently transforming the Roman army. From recruitment to training and equipment, his changes created a disciplined, professional force capable of sustained campaigns, rather than the short-term militia armies of the past. Soldiers became loyal to their generals, enhancing effectiveness but also altering Rome's political dynamics. Marius's rise marked a turning point in Roman history. His leadership during this critical period not only strengthened the Republic's military, but also laid the foundations for a professional army. The reforms he implemented during his command in 105 BC would influence Rome's legions for generations, redefining both the military and political landscape of the Republic. Recruitment reforms. One of the most transformative aspects of Gaius Marius's military reforms was the overhaul of the army's recruitment system. Before his changes, service in the legions was restricted to Roman citizens who met a minimum property requirement, typically owning assets valued at 3,500 sesterces or more. This limitation ensured that only wealthier citizens, capable of supplying their own arms, armor, and provisions, could serve. While this system had helped maintain a certain level of discipline and self-sufficiency, it also restricted the size of the army and excluded the majority of the population, leaving Rome vulnerable during periods of widespread conflict or large-scale invasions. Marius's decision to eliminate the property requirement was a radical shift. By opening the legions to the landless poor, known as the proletariat, he significantly expanded the pool of potential recruits. These men, who had little opportunity for social mobility or economic advancement in civilian life, were suddenly given a path to personal gain, both materially and socially. The state now provided weapons, armor, and equipment, removing the previous financial barriers to service. In return, soldiers received regular pay, the chance to participate in the spoils of war, and the possibility of rising through the ranks, creating a strong incentive for loyalty and commitment. Another crucial change was the extension of service terms. Unlike the citizen militias of the past, which were called up for campaigns and disbanded afterward, Marius instituted long-term enlistments, typically lasting 16 years. This effectively created the first professional standing army in Roman history. Soldiers now retained their training, experience, and cohesion over time, making the legions far more effective and reliable in combat. The shift from short-term militia service to a permanent career-based military fundamentally changed the way Rome waged war, allowing for larger, better-trained forces capable of sustained operations far from home. However, these recruitment reforms also carried significant political consequences, because the state relied on its generals to organize, pay, and lead these professional armies, soldiers became increasingly loyal to their commanders rather than the Republic itself. Generals like Marius held the power to reward or punish their men directly, creating a personal bond of loyalty that would later allow ambitious leaders to challenge the authority of the Senate. While the reforms strengthened Rome's military capacity and solved the immediate problem of manpower, they also set the stage for a shift in political power from Rome's traditional ruling class to its army commanders, a dynamic that would profoundly shape the Republic's future. Organizational reforms. One of the most significant changes introduced by Gaius Marius was the complete reorganization of the Roman army. Previously, legions were structured according to the manipular system, which divided soldiers into small units called maniples with distinct battlefield roles. While effective in earlier campaigns, this system had limitations. Coordination between maniples was complex, and gaps between units could be exploited by disciplined enemies. It also relied on short-term citizen soldiers, who often lacked extensive training or experience. Marius replaced this system with the cohort as the primary tactical unit. Each cohort consisted of roughly 600 men, divided into 6 centuries of 100 soldiers. Within centuries, soldiers were organized into contubernia of 10 men, creating the smallest unit for close cooperation and efficient command. This structure balanced flexibility with stability, allowing cohorts to act independently while remaining part of the larger legion. Marius also standardized legionary symbols. He eliminated older emblems like the minotaur, boar, and wolf, establishing the eagle or aquila as the sole standard. The eagle became a unifying symbol of Roman military power, fostering pride, discipline, and loyalty among the troops. The new organization increased battlefield resilience. Cohorts were dense, solid units with minimal gaps, reducing the risk of panic spreading among soldiers. Troops were trained to operate as a disciplined, coordinated force, improving both offensive and defensive effectiveness. By consolidating command, standardizing units, and emphasizing cohesion, Marius transformed the army into a professional force capable of standing against large and well-organized enemies. These reforms marked a shift in military philosophy. Soldiers now understood their role within a unified system. Units supported one another, and the legion operated as a cohesive entity. This structure laid the foundation for Rome's military successes and defined the army's organization for centuries. Equipment and tactics. Marius's reforms extended beyond recruitment and organization to the very tools and tactics of the Roman soldier. He standardized weapons and armor across the legions, ensuring that every soldier was equipped uniformly and could operate effectively in concert with his comrades. The gladius, a short sword designed for close combat, remained the primary weapon, while the pugio dagger served as a secondary sidearm. The pilum javelin, a key element of Roman battlefield strategy, was slightly modified under Marius. Previously, the iron shank was attached to the wooden shaft with 2 nails. Marius replaced one nail with a weaker wooden peg. Upon impact, the peg would bend or break, rendering the pilum unusable and causing enemy shields to become encumbered, giving the Roman legionaries an advantage during the ensuing melee. A cornerstone of Marius's tactical reforms was self-sufficiency. Soldiers were required to carry all of their equipment, including food, tools, and entrenching gear, earning the nickname Marius's mules. This heavy load did more than supply troops with necessary gear. It served as rigorous physical conditioning, increasing endurance and strength. Additionally, it allowed legions to construct fortifications, camps, and defensive earthworks quickly without waiting for a cumbersome baggage train to catch up. This mobility and adaptability gave Roman forces a strategic edge, enabling them to respond rapidly to changing battlefield conditions. The legionaries' primary defense remained the scutum, a large, curved shield extending from shoulder to shin. Unlike purely defensive shields, the scutum could be used offensively, allowing soldiers to bash opponents while remaining protected. Combined with disciplined formations, the shield enabled legionaries to maintain cohesion under pressure, reducing the risk of panic even when facing numerically superior foes. Through these reforms, Marius created an army that was not only uniform and disciplined, but also physically conditioned and tactically versatile. Soldiers were capable of sustained campaigns, rapid marches, and fortified encampments, while still delivering devastating offensive power in close combat. The integration of standardized equipment, self-reliance, and tactical discipline transformed the Roman legion into a formidable and highly effective military force, capable of facing the most dangerous threats to the Republic: cavalry and auxiliaries. While Marius's reforms dramatically strengthened the infantry, the cavalry remained a persistent weakness in the Roman military system. Traditional Roman cavalry had never been a dominant force on the battlefield. Roman equites, drawn from wealthier citizens, were often limited in numbers and training, making them less effective against the large, highly mobile cavalry forces of Rome's northern and eastern adversaries. Recognizing this deficiency, Marius made the bold decision to reduce reliance on native Roman cavalry and instead incorporate allied and native cavalry from across the Republic. These units were often better trained, more experienced, and equipped with specialized weapons and armor suited to their regional styles of warfare. By integrating these allied forces, Marius enhanced the army's mobility, reconnaissance capabilities, and tactical versatility, allowing it to respond effectively to threats that demanded rapid, coordinated maneuvers. In addition to cavalry, Marius made extensive use of light infantry auxiliaries. These units were drawn from various peoples both within and outside the Republic, including Balearic slingers, Cretan archers, and lightly armed Spanish melee troops. Each of these groups brought unique skills to the battlefield. Balearic slingers, for example, were renowned for their ability to launch projectiles accurately over long distances, disrupting enemy formations before contact with heavy infantry. Cretan archers provided precise range support, and the Spanish light troops offered speed and agility, capable of harassing enemy flanks, pursuing fleeing opponents, or conducting reconnaissance in difficult terrain. The combination of professional heavy infantry and specialized auxiliary units created a balanced, adaptable force. The legionaries formed the backbone of the army, delivering shock power and discipline in close combat, while the cavalry and light infantry provided flexibility, speed, and tactical depth. This integration allowed Roman armies to operate effectively across diverse environments, from dense forests and rolling hills to open plains, and against a wide range of foes, including heavily armed Germanic tribes and mobile Gallic war bands. Over time, the reliance on auxiliary forces became a hallmark of Roman military strategy. By complementing the legionaries with skilled regional troops, Marius established a model for combined arms warfare that would define Roman armies for centuries. The professional, disciplined infantry, supported by agile cavalry and specialized auxiliaries, created a system capable of responding to varied threats, projecting power across the Republic and maintaining Rome's dominance on multiple fronts. Long-term impact. The Marian Reforms marked a turning point in Roman history, transforming the Republic's military into a professional, disciplined, and highly effective fighting force. For the first time, Rome possessed standing legions that did not dissolve at the end of a campaign. Soldiers now served for long terms, trained continuously, and accumulated battlefield experience over many years. This continuity dramatically increased the effectiveness of the legions, allowing Rome to field armies that were cohesive, resilient, and capable of sustained warfare. The immediate results were clear. Under Marius's command, the reformed legions decisively defeated the Cimbri and Teutones at the battles of Aquae Sextii in 102 BC and Vercellae in 101 BC, eliminating the northern threat and restoring confidence in Rome's military power. Yet while these reforms solved Rome's pressing manpower and battlefield problems, they also altered the balance of power within the Republic. Because soldiers now depended on their commanders for pay, loot, and eventual rewards such as land grants, their loyalty increasingly shifted away from the Roman state and toward individual generals. The Senate, which had traditionally exercised authority over the army through short-term citizen service, found its influence weakened. Armies became personal instruments of power, tied closely to the ambitions of the men who commanded them. This new reality had far-reaching political consequences. In the decades following Marius, powerful commanders such as Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar would use their personal armies to challenge political rivals and, at times, the authority of the state itself. Civil wars became more frequent as generals marched on Rome, backed by veterans who were loyal to their leader rather than to abstract republican institutions. The very professionalism that made the Roman army so effective on the battlefield also made it a decisive factor in domestic politics. Over time, the strain of repeated internal conflicts eroded the foundations of the Republic. The old system of shared power between the Senate and elected magistrates could not withstand armies that answered to individuals rather than the state. This gradual shift culminated in the rise of Augustus and the establishment of the imperial system, where military loyalty was centralized under a single ruler. In the end, the Marian Reforms proved to be a double-edged sword. They saved Rome from immediate military collapse and created what would become the most formidable army of the ancient world. At the same time, they reshaped Roman politics in ways that the Republic could not survive. Marius's legacy, therefore, lies not only in military innovation, but in the profound transformation of the Roman state itself.